Okay, this is a video I've thought about making for a couple of weeks. And I want to talk about the fire service dispute at the moment, the strikes over the changes to the fire service pension. So I want to outline a few things. This isn't going to be a sort of snappy, punchy 2-minute political video. One, because I'm a boring bastard who talks always for too long on things, and two, because I want to go into some of the things that you don't hear about on the news. That you don't hear about on the news, not because they're not real issues, real grievances that firefighters have with the deal that's been offered, but because they're not the kind of punchy things that you can easily get across in that format. So if you're interested in knowing some of what this dispute's about, or you know people who are, point them in the direction of this video and maybe they'll see some of the things that's really pissed us off, and that really is putting our backs up with regard to the deal as much as it is a deal. A deal suggests there's some kind of to and fro involved, and there hasn't been really, but as the deal that we are being offered at the moment. Bit of background: I've been a firefighter for about 18 and a half years. The Fire Brigades Union has done quite a good job, I think, in this instance, negotiating as best it could, certainly providing evidence to the government on all of this, but I am not a member of the Fire Brigades Union. I left a few years ago after a local issue, but I have withdrawn my labour alongside my FBU colleagues on 2 occasions now, and I will be doing again tonight. That's where I stand. Certainly not interested in discussing what about people who haven't withdrawn their labour. I'm not interested in discussing that. That certainly isn't something I would want to discuss online. What I want to discuss single on is these particular issues. First thing I should mention is the issue that has dominated the news debate, which is the issue of the retirement age increasing. Let me give you some idea of what that's about. I joined 18 and a half years ago. My expectation when I joined was that I would retire after 30 years service. And you know, whenever you join a job that has a physical component, you take a gamble, you press a gamble button, and you decide at the time whether that's a gamble button that you want to press. And the button that I had to press was that I was 23 years old. After 30 years service, I would be 53. Would I be able to maintain my physical fitness? Would I be able to maintain my health till I was 53 years of age? And it was actually a little bit easier in those days as well, because they would uprate your pension. So if I got to 27 and a half years service, if then my knees gave way, they'd say, well, we'll grant you an extra 2.5 years service because it's an ill health retirement, that's what they called it, and we'll uprate you to 30 years. So that was the gamble that I had to make at the time. Those extra 2.5 years ill health bit went by the wayside a few years ago, pretty much because people were taking the piss, I think. They wanted to clamp down on that, and that did force people actually to work 30 years more often. I could kind of understand that. What I can't understand is what is following now, because what they're saying now is that gamble that you took, well, we've got a better gamble for you now, Jim. The gamble that we want you to take is so much more fun, because you're so much more likely to fail at that particular gamble. Because what we're now saying is, yeah, you decided voluntarily to take that gamble to 53. Now you're going to have to gamble to 60. Now, I'm quite a healthy guy. I've only had 2 days sickness absence in the 18 and a half years that I've worked there. I keep myself fit all the time, go out on my bike a lot, but I cannot guarantee, however much I do, I can't guarantee that I'm not going to develop an issue with my knees, that my back's not going to give way. Those are the kind of things that happen to people as they get older. And there's knack all that you can do about those things if they happen. So that's a gamble that I can't do anything about. And what happens if I don't make those years? What happens if just after I turn 53, let's say I get to 54, and then I can't carry on anymore? Well, what could do is I could take my pension early, but this is what happens with the calculation. Let's imagine I get to 55. It makes the maths. I'll try and keep the maths as easy as I can, and I'll show you how the government is screwing us over in these circumstances. So say my knees go at 55. I've already lost 5 years of contributions because I can't get to 60, but then I'm not having to work those 5 years. So let's put that bit to one side and see how the maths works out. What the government says is it would have to be cost neutral to them. So what they're saying is then, you would have retired at 60. Let's work out, say they calculate you would have lived till you were 80, so 20 years. That's the same as we would have been paying you your pension over 20 years. And let's say your pension was 10 grand a year to make the maths easy. They'd say, well, that's £200,000, 10 grand times 20 years, £200,000 we would have been paying you. So what we're going to do is we're going to smear that 200 grand, not over those 20 years, but over the 25 years, taking it back to the 55. And so we're going to pay you 200 grand over 25 years, which would be 8 grand a year. Well, that's kind of what they're saying, but they have this thing called this deferred payment age. And what deferred payment age is, payment age to rip you off. That's basically all it means, because what it means is the deferred payment age is, what they actually say is this. Okay, so you're now retiring at 55, you're going to draw your pension at 55. Now, we would have been paying you between 60 and 80. So we would have been paying you for 20 years between 60 and 80. But let's just pretend in some alternate universe that we wouldn't have been paying you until you were 65. Let's just pretend that for a minute. If that was true, we'd be paying you 10 grand for only 15 years, wouldn't we? So that would be a pot of 150 grand. Oh, that's 50 grand less. So if we paid you 150 grand and smear that now over 25 years, you only get 6 grand a year. So that is what I actually do. Rather than taking this smearing process over from where you would have retired at 60, they pretend, even though they would have been paying you between 60 and 65, they just kind of pretend they wouldn't have been. And pretend that they only have started paying you at 65 and say, oh, so we're only paying you for 15 years, we'll smear that back. So rather than getting you 10 grand a year, you'd only get 6 grand a year. So that would be a 40% loss of payment. They'd suffer you that 40% loss of payment. Why? Because you've been a bad person? Because you haven't been a good worker? No, because your knees have failed. All your good efforts going in the gym and trying to maintain your operational readiness, bollocks to that. Your knees have gone. Your pension's going to go down by 40%. That's one of the grievances that people have, and that's what ties in the fact that you're having to take a gamble that you didn't want to take, that you didn't agree to take, that your arm is being twisted around your back to take. And that if that gamble fails, if you come out unlucky on the wrong side of that gamble, they are going to skin you. They're going to cheat you out of some of the money with this business of the deferred deferred pensions age. So that ties into that, but I want to talk about a couple of other bits that you won't have heard talked about. When this whole thing kicked off, the government commissioned a report, I think it was called the Hutton Report, into pensions within the public sector, and Lord Hutton made some recommendations, and the government said, well, we'll agree to, whatever his recommendations, we'll certainly take them on board. And one of the recommendations that Lord Hutton made was to do with abatement. And what he said was abatement has to go. It is manifestly unfair. You cannot carry on with this business of maintaining that whatever pension these public sector workers have already got that we will honour, you can't maintain that while abatement is in place. Let me explain what abatement is. What abatement means is, if under the present scheme I was to get to 53, I've done my 30 years, and I was to claim my pension then and start working for the fire service again the next day, they'd pay me, but they deduct my pension off what they paid me. So if my pension was half pay, they'd take away half my pay rate. So at the moment as a firefighter you earn £28,000 a year. If I was getting a 14 grand pension, what they'd say is, okay, well, you're already getting a 14 grand pension, so now, rather than pay you 28 grand a year, we're only going to pay you 14 grand a year. So when you add what we're paying you to your pension, you're on what we would have been if you weren't on the pension. That's what abatement is. And that carries on up until the point you actually stop working there, and then you just get your pension. Okay, so that's what abatement is. Now, what Hutton said is, you can't do that and still claim that you're honouring somebody's old pension agreement. So if you have somebody like Jim here, who would be retiring at 53, and then he's going to move on for the latter part of his employment and have to work till he's 60. In the new scheme, you can't at 53 then give him his new pension, give him the old part of his pension, but then take it off him until he's 60. That's not fair. That is manifestly unfair. It cannot happen. Well, the government read obviously what Hutton wrote and said bollocks to that. I don't care how unfair it is. We're still going to carry on claiming that we're honouring their pension scheme, but abatement is going to remain. So what they were saying is, yes, we'll honour your pension, Jim, and at 53, what will happen with me is the new scheme comes in 2015. At that point, I'll have done 20 years. So I'll have 20 of the 30 years I could have got in the old scheme. At the age of 53, I'll have got 20 years in the old scheme, 10 years in the new scheme. And then I'll work another 7 years. So at 60, I'll have had 17 years in the new scheme, 20 years in the old scheme. And so what they're saying is, at 53, you can get what you're having in the old scheme, but we'll deduct it off what we're paying you. Bollocks to the fact that Lord Hutton was absolutely clear, categorically crystal clear, that that was unfair, and you cannot claim to be honouring somebody's pension entitlement that they've already accrued. If you do that, bollocks to that, we're doing it anyway. But it's actually worse than that, because it's at the discretion of the brigades anyway, whether they're prepared to let you retire. And the smart money at the moment is, if I did do that at 53, that they'd say, well, you've now had a break in your new pension scheme. We're freezing your new pension scheme with 10 years in it, and that won't now pay out until you're either 65 or 67. So this honouring my old pension scheme that would have paid out at 53, but they're honouring it in every aspect, but I won't be able to get it till I'm 60 unless I stop being a firefighter at 53 and smash to pieces the 10 years that I've paid into the new scheme. And I've just shown you with a 55 example rather than 60 just how much that would smash that to pieces. So there is no way that I can claim what I'm entitled to in the old scheme with the way that it is. I either have to just accept that I cannot claim that entitlement and just accept that the government are ripping me off with double speak, saying, oh no, we're honouring the commitment, but you secretly can't have it until you're 60. I've just got to accept that. So that's one problem. This is another problem, which is that the old scheme, I understood how the old scheme worked. You could say that I was missold the old scheme, by the way. When I joined the fire service, I was told by an employee of my service, this scheme is a guarantee, right? It'll never change. Not in the 30 years you'll be in the job, and you'll be getting a final salary scheme based on this. None of the terms will change while you're in the job. If the banks had done that to me, they'd have been fined billions of pounds and be making payments everywhere for mis-selling. But seemingly when the public sector mis-sells you something, that's acceptable. I was mis-sold this, it would seem, at the time. But the scheme that I was mis-sold, I understood. See, this is how it works. They basically want people that are going to stay in for the 30 years. They don't want people who's going to dip in and out, do 10 years and run, do 15 years and run. So they had a system where they pay you, this is how it works, a 60th a year. You paid about 11% of your pay, which is going to go up to about 15% in the new scheme. 15% of your pay will go towards your pension. You'll never see it. It goes towards the pension scheme. Was 11%, and that got you a 60th a year for 20 years. Then in the final 10 years, this was the little carrot to make sure you stayed in. You got 2 60ths each year, you see, so that gave you 40 60ths, 2/3 pay overall after 30 years. So that was the carrot to keep you in, but of course, you know, it's like a contract that goes over 30 years where it's an uneven payment. It also behooves them to honour the contract all the way through. Now, when the government originally said, and Hutton was doing his report and all this kind of stuff, that they're going to honour the commitment, I wrote to the Fire Services Minister. I doubt I was the only person to make that representation. I'm quite sure the unions will have done the same thing. I'm quite sure some other individuals would have done the same thing, saying it's manifestly unfair to say to somebody who's done 15 years, for example, we're going to honour your commitment if you only give them 15 60ths, because you've denied them the chance to get any of that double accrual rate in the last 10 years. So they should have access to a sort of pro rata amount of that double accrual. If they've been in for half the expected period of 30 years, then they should have half that double accrual. So they should be uprated by 5 of those 10 extra 60ths. If they've done 20 years, then 2/3 of those extra 60ths, about 6 or 7 60ths, they should be uprated. And the government accepted that, in as much as they said, yeah, we accept that it's a bit unfair, it's all end-loaded, it's the pension scheme, and so you should have had access to some of that. So on a kind of pro-rata basis, if you haven't done your 30 years, we'll uprate it. So I'm in some ways would have been in the worst position, having done 20 of the 30 years. I'd have got 20 60ths for my first 20 years that I'd paid very expensive. It'd have been very expensive 60th at 11% of my pay to get each 60th each year. But then in those final 10 years, I should have got another 20 60ths. Those final 10 were worth as much as the first 20 put together, but still only for 11% a year. So what they've said to me is, okay, well, you can get another 6 and a bit 60ths. Okay, you'll end up on about 27 60ths. But to do that, you've got to stay in for another 10 years. You've got to show that you would have done the 30 years to be able to get that up rating to the 20 years that you've got. So we're going to freeze your pension after 20 years. That old pension will stop, but you need to stay in the job for another 10 years to show that you would have done that extra 10 years to have had access to the double accrual. Now that I can kind of understand. It's a bit mean-spirited. I think they should have just uprated people, but that I could understand. But here's the shit trick. Here's the really shit trick that they pulled. That isn't what the government did. No. What the government did was this. They didn't say you've got to stay in the job the remainder of those 30 years, for me another 10 years. What they said is you've got to be in the new pension scheme. However crap it is. It doesn't matter if the new contribution rate was 90% and all you got back from it was a bag of marbles. You'd still have to be in the new pension scheme for those extra years to gain a proper, fair representation of what you should be getting for your old pension scheme, which we've frozen. Now, how can that be fair? How can that be them honouring the pension commitment for the pension I've already paid into when I have to join a pension scheme, no matter how crooked and badly made and unfair it is, to get that proper reimbursement for what I've put in. So there's just a couple of the issues that are getting people worked up. There are issues that the government doesn't seem to have any motivation in moving on, and the reason is because they're not actually interested, I contend, in a fair, equitable and reasonable outcome to this dispute. They're just basically concerned with what is the worst possible deal we can give the firefighters, the same as it is for everybody else within the public sector, apart from the MP's pension scheme, which is of course the only scheme that they're not going to look at. Well, there's a fucking surprise. If you've got this far, thank you for watching. I hope it's enlightened you as to some of the issues that are involved, and bye for now.